Welcome everyone to this overview webinar for the MIT xPRO Drug and Medical Device Development, a Strategic Approach course. This will be overviewing the course. So welcome everyone. We'll have a chance to introduce the course and take your questions and try and answer any questions you have about it. So jumping in, I am Chandran Seshagiri. I'm be facilitating this webinar this morning. Professor Michael Sima, who is Program Director and MIT Associate Dean of Innovation, is the person who created the course, and he'll be introing the course. And I will give him a little bit more of an introduction in just a couple of slides. Why this course at MIT xPRO and what is MIT xPRO offering here? This is programs that have been developed with an understanding of how to take a course like this and put it online, make an online content available in a way that can really help professionals build those skills on the job, right? So, the fact that this is very focused on materials and application that are relevant to work you're doing right now in the field, are looking to expand their skills or learn about other areas of the field. And so these are really developed with a lot of insight and research on how best to present these courses in an online fashion so that it can be made available to anyone who is able to take the time to do this. So along those same lines, and what we've just been talking a lot about right now is who is this program for? And so as mentioned, right, it's designed for individuals and companies that operate in the health product industry, but also those who are looking to maybe enter and learn more about the industry. So, the course, I don't know, Professor Sima, it's 14, 15 runs so far, maybe?
Yeah,
it's quite that many.
Lost
but
track.
Yeah,
and
I think the course
of course we do a version at MIT also. So there's quite a few. We've got a lot of practice.
Yeah, and one of the things we've seen is, we've offered the online sort of version for professionals, is we see a good range and an interesting mix, and it's really great for engineers who are looking to understand what goes into some of the strategic thinking about developing a new product. I know I started as a sort of scientist engineer, and didn't early on in my career really understand a lot of the strategic pieces around the technologies and science I was working on. This really brings a lot of that perspective. Executives who are running companies and need to be thinking through some of these strategic choices, scientists, QA and RA, all of these choices are usually inflected heavily with the regulatory and quality requirements and inputs that are important to making the right choices. And then the others that are really worth noting, we see entrepreneurs. We've definitely seen a number of MDs join the course who have an idea for a product and don't know where exactly to start necessarily. And they've certainly, just in feedback I've heard, gotten a lot out of being able to see kind of the process as a whole and how to think about some of the important pieces. We talked about groups and companies that want to bring members of a team in. We've also seen, I think not represented here, but we've seen investors take the course who are investors in either are moving into investment in the life sciences or have some experience but want to understand better some of the hands-on choices to be made. So without further ado, I'll just quickly introduce Professor Sima. He mentioned he's worked in both devices and pharma. He's program director and associate dean of innovation at MIT. He's also, started up several successful startups in both the device and pharma space, and brings that hands-on experience, both that he's done as well as with colleagues he's worked with through all of these ventures, and developed that experience of learning what it takes to really launch and build a successful product from that earliest concept and idea phase through. So he brings that experience and developed it, and I'll let him talk about the motivations for developing the course, but it's from that background that he's developed this course. And so I'll turn it over to him.
Thank you, Chandran. Again, Michael Sima. I've been 35 years at MIT, but as Chandran said, a lot of my research is what I would call translational research, and that's actually making the product. And so it's not just the research behind it, but actually getting it to patients. And yeah, that's generally in the form of a startup, although I've done quite a bit of licensing to larger companies over my career. And those startups have either gone public or have been acquired. And in fact, it came up in the last webinar for this past course, which was Wednesday. And the one company was acquired early on in my career by Johnson & Johnson. And part of the deal was I had to sign up as a consultant for 5 years. And it was an eye-opening experience for me. It was from their Janssen Pharma division. And I got to work on problems in a big company and with the executive team. It was really fantastic. I learned a lot from that process. But along the way, I constantly meet with young people. That's part of my job. I mentor young people. And I realized that they're starting their careers, deciding on research, what they want to do for their thesis, for example. And they don't have the perspective of seeing what's required at the end. And what I've learned in my career is that you have to know what it's like at the end of the development process to know what you should be doing at the beginning. And so the motivation behind this course started with those young people and saying, what could I do to give them the insight so when they decide what research to do and how to go about doing it, they do so with an eye of where it ultimately has to go. And so, everybody talks about this, but what they say is, well, reach out and have people in the industry speak with these young people. But from a logistics point of view, it ends up being a nightmare. So I got the idea that I would go to these people and record a long list. It was like 60 people, about 40 of which ended up in the course. I interviewed them and recorded by video. It recorded the interviews, typically about 90 minutes of conversation with these folks. And then I took all that video and broke it up into 5-minute clips, generally on single ideas. And then I organized, curated this so that one topic, let's say reimbursement, for example, I had clips from various folks, pharma industry, device industry, and have them comment on things like, when do you start thinking about reimbursement? And it was very difficult to do. It was the most work I've ever done on anything for about a 2-year time frame. And that's what you find in this course. You see me, but only at the beginning and the end of a learning sequence. It's really these folks. And these are the who's who of the industry. This is just a sampling of them, but these folks are all leaders in their field. They are been both drugs and medical devices, orthopedics, cancer therapy, immunology, all kinds of fields. And it was a real pleasure. And you might ask, well, how did I decide on these folks? Well, about half these folks I'd worked with professionally, and they were the ones that mentored me, is the way I would put it. And so I wanted their input in this course. And so I thought it was, that's basically how it's organized. So I mentioned about the order. When you start to develop a course, you look at other courses and you see what's there. I mean, it's not like there aren't other courses available for this kind of field. But what you'll find about one thing about them is that they're either for pharma or for medical devices, because they legitimately point out, well, the development process is different. And I guess at the detail level, of course it is. The other thing you'll find about those courses is that they envision the process as a linear one. You start this, and then you do this, and it's sort of like the view, well, you're going to do a phase 1 safety study, and then a proof of concept phase 2 study, and then a pivotal study. And the truth is, though, I've never been involved in a development program of a medical product, anyways, that is anything close to linear. It doesn't happen that way. And the other thing is that there are so many things that you need to take into account early that you really should start at the end. And I sort of mentioned this earlier. So we start with a strategy. And week 1 is strategy. You can see here, I've sort of answered the question I put forward earlier, is that when you start thinking about reimbursement, turns out you think about it right at the beginning. Because even for drugs these days, the largest single source of failure in recent years for drugs, not just devices, but drugs, is reimbursement and market access. It's not toxicity. It's not efficacy. It's actually, there are many cases drugs have gotten approved and haven't sold a dime of product. And it's because they didn't think about it early enough. In medical devices, it's really important, right? If as you're envisioning the device, is it going to be done in a doctor's office? Is it going to be done in a hospital? It's going to be applied. The reimbursement landscape for just that simple example, those two things, is completely different. And what you have to do in those two arenas, as far as what the product looks like, is completely different. So you can't wait, developing a product to be done in the OR in the hospital, only to find out at the end that oh my gosh, this procedure is reimbursed as a lump sum, a DRG as we call it, and the hospital's going to pay for this device, not the insurance company or not Medicare. You have to do it. So it's all of a sudden the hospital is very careful about whether they buy anything new, right? Because they can't get reimbursed for it. If you designed this around a procedure that could be done in the doctor's office, completely different. Same indication, just the setting. But you needed to know that right from day one in the development process. So these are the kind of things. Proof of concept. We talk about in this course a very different view of what proof of concept is. And you'll see the speakers describe why what they mean by proof of concept is different than most people's definition. Most people's definition of proof of concept is generally a placebo-controlled trial or a sham-controlled trial if it's a device. So it's kind of the proof of concept for the FDA, but that's not what we mean. You'll hear, for example, investors. We were talking about investors taking this course. They won't invest in a concept unless they can know in 18 months whether the idea works or has any merit. So what that means is that you go into your first in man study that's always a safety study, but you have secondary outcome measures that are based on, let's say, a biomarker that says my hypothesis of what my drug or what my device is doing is validated or is verified by that first experience in man. That's what we mean by proof of concept in this study. And you need to design the development program so you can hit that. So yeah, intellectual property, outcome measures, trials, and indications. Okay, so intellectual property, as I'm sure many of you know, is a very important part of medical products. The development timeline is extremely long. And you're inevitably having to disclose what you're doing. And if it's not to the FDA, it's potential clinical trial sites. I mean, you have to. I mean, you have to do it to IRBs to be able to do any experiments with humans. So you are inevitably disclosing things fairly early, and way early compared with when you'd actually be on the market. So you have to have intellectual property to protect yourself. We talk about that. We talk about the challenges for many medical products about things like eligible subject matter. Not all, especially in the biopharma space, not all new drugs in that space can be patented as compositions of matter, for example. And so there's a whole lot that we focus on there that is what you have to watch for in developing and protecting IP or getting IP for medical products. Outcome measures. Again, before you begin the research, let alone the development program, you have to understand what are acceptable outcome measures, for the indication you're working on. I tell students, this was my biggest learning experience. I'm an engineer by training, very quantitative. The first time I had an experience in developing a medical product, we'd spent $40 million before I realized that this product that we were developing was going to be approved by asking patients to fill out a form. Their qualitative impression, it was a 10 centimeter VAS scale, of how they were feeling. And it said, what about all these fancy biomarkers that we're measuring and stuff like that? Sorry, those are not acceptable outcome measures to the FDA. So it's a totally different look at what you have to achieve, right? There's going to be noise in that measurement. So you have to have, your product has to be not just a little better than the standard of care. It has to be a lot better, because if it's a little better, you're going to have a very difficult time meeting statistical significance in a clinical trial. And it changes the nature of not only the development program, but the research that you do behind the product. So we talk a lot about this is outcome measures, approvable outcome measures, trial design. There is a long list of products that work that failed. And the reason is because the trial was designed incorrectly. The trial was not designed to eliminate noise. And so this is another recurring theme in the course, is really focus right up front on how you're going to design this trial, how many sites you're going to need. Because it turns out there are many indications, because of the noise factor, that the more sites you have, the more noise you have. Now, of course, more sites you have, the faster recruitment in principle, right? So there's a trade-off, but it's super important. There it goes. Oh, 3. Okay, now the last part of the intro is on quality. So this is in 3rd week of the course, 7 weeks. So we're about halfway through. Quality, a quality system is a requirement of the development of all medical products, drugs, devices, and devices being brought. We're talking software here, not just orthopedic hardware or something like that. It's quality. And one of the speakers, I like to quote him. He says, when I started my career, I thought quality was just something to satisfy the FDA. But uniformly, you will hear people say, after I've done this now for a couple of decades, I realize that you're not doing this quality system stuff for the FDA. You're doing it for yourself. because it turns out the best way to develop a medical product is by applying quality system techniques. And it's absolutely true. It's a discipline that not only you end up with the best possible product by applying that technique. So we talk a lot about that. And you'll notice that this has happened before we really focus on medical devices or drugs or stuff. And in fact, you'll see as we get into medical devices and drugs and so forth, by biopharmaceuticals, that even though the experts are from the device industry or the pharma industry, they're actually speaking about the same thing. Redundancy. It's easy to see how you might have redundant systems in a device to overcome particular failure modes. Turns out when you develop a molecule as a drug, you do the same thing. For example, if it's eliminated only renally, then or it's eliminated by just a certain enzyme, the drug, for example, if you find a patient after you're out in 1 million patients without that enzyme, all of a sudden you've got a toxic event there. So now what they do is when you develop a drug, you make sure it's eliminated at least by 2 methods, enzymatically and renally. That way, if you run into a patient that's got renal compromised, they will eliminate the drug by enzymatic degradation. So it's a completely analogous to what you would do in a device. Then about the second half of the 3rd week of the course, we start diving into each of the kind of classes of products. And so we start with medical devices. But now remember, medical devices are not just hardware. They also include diagnostics, software, all of that kind of stuff. And so we look at each of those. Yes, so here's an example of diagnostics. I distinguish diagnostics from biomarkers. Biomarkers are important because they play into the development process of all medical products, drugs, devices, and so forth. They're very analogous to diagnostics, except that they're not being used for a clinical decision. They're being used for a development decision. I did a learning sequence on wearable devices. And the reason why I wanted to do that is because they're kind of an emerging field, over the past 15 years. There's a big controversy about whether they should be regulated or what circumstances should they be regulated, other ones. So it's a good test case for applying some of the things we've learned to date in the course. And so we cover that. Software, big part of the medical products industry, and increasingly important. And so we cover that and see how, for example, we see how quality systems are applied to software development. And again, you may not be interested in software, medical software in general, but it'll touch every product. And more importantly, it's a good test case of seeing how we can apply some of the general knowledge that's being applied in quality systems for devices and drugs to software. And then, of course, by this week, we start delving into drug development. And again, it's like you can compare and contrast, and we do that multiple times, what was done, what we discussed in devices and how it applied to drugs. And so this is week 6 is sort of the latter part of that. We talk about things like formulation. Seems like not a real super exciting area of drug development, but I can tell you I've worked on quite a number of drug development programs where it came down to whether or not you're going to have a product or not, dependent on whether you can actually formulate it and make it stable. And the last slide is, the last week is on parenteral products. And biologics, which are a special class. I mean, let's face it, as far as if you look at the pharmaceutical industry, dollar value, parenteral products, particularly biologics, are the largest part of the pharma industry today is right here. And they get a very special look that I think is very interesting to compare with the others, in the sense that a biologic, a humanized protein, looks can't be defined as a composition of matter. It's folded in the right way. It's glycosylated in the right way. All these things, and so from a regulatory point of view, it gets a very special look that, interestingly enough, is now being applied to certain types of software. The same type of regulatory approach for biologics is now being applied to artificial intelligence software. And we discuss, how can that be? How can that be similar? These are completely different areas, but it turns out from a quality perspective, the things you have to do are very similar in those two areas. I think it's on the assignments. Yeah. So we have some assignments here. It's pretty light touch. One of the things that we've done is done some case studies. And these case studies are written in a way that puts you in the middle of. So if you've ever taken a business school course or a law school course, often that is written in, those assignments are written in this style, that they don't tell you the answer, right? They put you in the middle of and give you the evidence, give you the data, give you the observations, and then ask you, how would you solve this problem? And so these are written in that style. And they are based on historical, actual things that happen. They are, and so we kind of know really how it works out. In many of the cases, I knew the people that were involved, and so I got a chance to kind of write the story that they experienced, and so you get a little practice doing, I guess, is the way I would put these things. And then there are lighter assignments, reading assignments, things like that, where I find interesting articles, either interesting articles or in some cases some regulatory documents that give you an idea. Take a look at how the FDA might view this, that sort of thing. Yeah. So the video lectures, I mean, everything's in a small clips, like 5 minutes is on the longer side for these things, but they're strung together. And I like it because I think for busy professionals, you can do it in bite-sized chunks. As I said, there's over 40 interviews with industry experts that have gone into making all these clips. They definitely are real world applications. That's all we talk about, is things that actually have happened or are happening. We do the case studies and a couple of assignments. Digital certificate is at the end, and I think it's I think we have a clip here of people then join a LinkedIn group that's part of that process. And I can tell you it's been a fantastic community of people that are connected that way. And peer learning and feedback. Okay, we just finished one of the cohorts just the other day, and I was telling Chandran that the most recent cohort was the most active on the discussion board. So not everybody can be in the webinars, because we're at this weird time during the day and they're all working. So these are all recorded. And then, but the discussion board is open all the time, 24/7. So you can post questions there. And what you find is a lot of the students will answer questions there. And this past group was the most active discussion board we've had. And so I really encourage that. Really, it's a real benefit to the course to get the experts we have in the course to tell their stories, their experiences. And we see a lot of that in this course. It's really is the icing on the cake for the course to have that done. And I use it typically before the webinars. I review all people's comments, and I actually adapt the webinar to focus in on the things that people are interested in or have commented on. The other day, that someone commented on something that I had firsthand experience with, and I got to tell that story on Wednesday. It's like, oh, I'm glad you brought this up, because let me tell you, I was there at the beginning of this, and it really it makes a big difference in the course when you can point to reality.
So I think I can speak to the
Why don't you
last
pick it up?
couple here. Yeah. So I think thank you first of all for that whole overview. I think you just alluded to the fact that ending the course, you'll get this certificate of completion that is something that you can put on your LinkedIn page. As Professor Sima mentioned, it's basically based on the assignments, which total up to 100 points. And so you need to basically get an 80 out of the 100 in order to obtain the certificate of completion. And, a lot of this is really about just doing the work more than anything else and showing that, you've thought about things. But as Professor Sima also indicated, you put this on your LinkedIn page, you get to join the LinkedIn group as well. That is not just, that peer learning from your current cohort, but you have, the last 10 or 12 or however many have gone through this program, and you'll, get to join that community of even a much larger set of professionals in this space. So that's a key part of completing the course. There's a link here for application. You can't click it from the screen, but it should be put into chat. I think it's just shown up there. So the link is available now in the Zoom chat box. So you could click through there. So it's an 8-week course. The general experience is that it, about a 5 to 6 hour per week commitment. That includes, there's over the course of that 8 weeks, there's 4 webinar sessions with Professor Sima. There are weekly office hours with the learning facilitator for the course. There's, in addition to that, there is in the chat right now an email link you can send additional questions to. And there's a question that just came in the Q&A. Could you comment further on the format for receiving feedback on the case studies? Are we submitting written assignments that are graded, including comments? My recollection on this is that you get a grade primarily for completing the assignment. I don't think there's really written feedback provided on the assignments, although we do review the assignments weekly in the office hours section, and often there's a good bit of discussion about specifically questions that people have. We try and do those reviews after the assignment's over, and so people have had a chance to both submit their answers and also see what the sort of posted. Again, it's these are real world case examples, and so there are posted answers for the assignments, but as with anything in these spaces, there's never just one answer. So there's always a good discussion. But if you want to add anything.
Yeah, I get, as students are doing the assignment, they post questions on the discussion board. And I think both the learning facilitator and myself tend to answer them there. I mean, there's no, we're not trying to make it difficult. I've done this for, like I said, I've been teaching for 35 years. So I kind of know that thinking process, on the spot, you have a question, send it out, and we'll try and get back to you and as soon as possible. And it really, that's the best way to do it. You don't need, we're not going to give you the whole answer, but as you develop it, you will come up with questions that we can respond to. Sometimes that's just just interpreting the question, just helping you interpret the question. And so it's I don't think, none of the students have said even those from outside the field have said that it's difficult. It's just getting the language down is the hardest part.
Great question.
We're done.
Then we can be done. So
yeah, they can always email to answer any questions that you may think of.
absolutely. Those of you who are throwing thanks, thank you for joining us. I
Thank you.
hope that this was really helpful, and I hope that we'll see a lot of you attending the course for this run.